It is an office to be achieved. Of the real leader, the people someday become aware and say, "This man serves well, let us follow him." We often utter hopes and prayers for a supreme leader, for a Messiah, one who will surely deliver us out of the hands of the Egyptians. He may come. Until he does, we must make the best use of all the elements of leadership we are able to develop. It seems to me that the present stage of our situation requires a diversified leadership. I am certain that there are two elements which are necessary. We need an element of radicalism and an element of conservatism. Radicalism to keep us from becoming satisfied, and conservatism to keep us balanced, to the end that the main body will be steady but alive, alert and progressive. We should guard against being stagnant on one hand or wide-eyed on the other. The matter-of-fact conservative has in these days fallen into disrepute, a disrepute greater probably than is justifiable, and his low estate blinds us to certain weaknesses of the glamorous radical. There is an inherent weakness in the temperament of the radical which is not generally perceived through it, as through the temperament of the man of bravery. There runs a streak of cowardice. The man with a reputation for bravery lives in constant fear that at some time he may not appear in the eyes of his fellows to be making a brave enough show. The man with a known name for radicalism may live in constant fear that at some time he may be deemed by his comrades to have acted conservatively. The man who feels that he must take risks when no risk is warranted may make a heroic soldier, but he will not make a good general. The man who feels that he must be radical, whether the situation demands it or not, may be stimulating force, but he will not be a wise leader. Neither professional radicalism nor stand-pat conservatism can alone provide the best leadership. Of course, if we produce one man in whom these two elements were properly fused, the man not afraid to act radically when swift change is necessary, and not afraid to act conservatively when it is necessary to stand unmoved, we shall have the ideal leader. Moreover, leadership involves more than individual leaders. There must be also a leading element, an element that can transmit and interpret to the greater mass the principles and policies that are formulated. This leading element should constantly draw on Negro youth, in order to be kept quickened and to safeguard against a vegetating leadership. If youth is not thus brought in and given a share in executing the work to be done, its ambitions, ideals, and energies will be largely dissipated. At many points in our social organism there is no life because of withered leadership. The thing to do is to cut out the dry rot, give the younger generation a chance. The impatience of youth to bring about changes should not be antagonized, it should be understood, it should not be curbed, it should be directed. This kind of cooperation is not entirely easy to establish, for age is at bottom afraid of youth, and youth is at bottom disdainful of age. Youth prefers to work alone and not have its enthusiasm shaped by experiences, and age loves to hone on its prerogatives, but we must seek to devise a cooperative scheme through which the new ideas and fresh forces of youth may be utilized to the highest degree. Such a scheme will afford youth a worthwhile objective on which to focus its surging energies and will serve to keep the older generation invigorated. Such a scheme would do much to redeem our lost generation, for Negro youth, like the post-war youth of the whole Western world, has its lost generation, a generation for which the traditional sanctions no longer exist, a generation that is adrift, dissatisfied, disillusioned, and cynical, or it is pleasure mad. Such a scheme will put youth in touch with life's realities and will provide an unsurpassed training ground for future leaders. The question of the leaders naturally brings up the questions of followers. There can be no leaders unless there are the followers. Followers have obligations and responsibilities as well as leaders. As followers, we need to have intelligence, a sense of loyalty, and a sense of honor. We need to have enough intelligence to weigh and estimate men so that we can recognize real leadership when we see it, whether it is high or lowly positions, and to detect the spurious from the genuine. Enough intelligence to stimulate and help real leadership both by approval when it is merited and by criticism when it is deserved. Enough intelligence not to be swept away by the winds of doctrine issuing from every loudmouth demagogue or smooth-tongued charlatan who comes along. We need a sense of loyalty that will impel us to give unstinted support whenever we find leadership that is capable and trustworthy, and to bear with it in its human weakness. And we need a sense of honor that will deem it an unworthy thing to seek to destroy a leader because of personal animosities or to crucify him merely to make a Roman holiday. Unless we can be followers of this kind, we have no reason or right to look for great leaders. Stereotypes, art, and money. I mentioned stereotypes under another topic, but I wish to add a word more about them. The common denominator thinking about the Negro in America, if we may call it thinking, is done in stereotypes. These stereotypes vary to the point of contradictoriness. The Negro, and that includes all Negroes, is lazy, shiftless, unreliable. He is an irresponsible child, a pathetically good-humored buffoon, a ridiculous caricature of a civilized man. He is an unconscious pilferer. He is incapable of mental and moral development. He is a brutal and degenerate criminal. One or more of these stereotypes enter into forming the ideas about Negro Americans held by the average white American. The interior causes of these stereotypes need not be discussed. These stereotypes have, for the greater part, been molded by what may be termed literary and artistic process. Some of the most persistent of them were formed on the minstrel stage. For nearly three-quarters of a century, black-face minstrelsy for the chief and most popular form of American entertainment. Hardly a hamlet in the country was too small to be visited by a minstrel show, and it was from the minstrel show that millions of white Americans got their conceptions of Negro character. On the minstrel stage the Negro was represented as a shuffling, happy-go-lucky, banjo-picking, singing, dancing darky, whose sole gastronomical delights were watermelon, possum, and chicken, and whose social outlet was a jamboree at which the chief diversion was expert razor slinging. To the minstrel stage can be traced the difficulty which white America finds in taking the Negro seriously. Much of the same sort of thinking was done in books about the Negro, with the further characterization of him as a base savage and an uncivilized being. In the early years, the moving pictures carried on this tradition, all of which sounds ridiculous and would be if these stereotypes did not color, influence, and constitute so large a part of national thinking about us. Now, just as these stereotypes were molded and circulated and perpetrated by literary and artistic processes, they must be broken up and replaced through similar means. No other means can be as fully effective. Some of this work has already been done, but the greater portion remains to be done, and by Negro writers and artists. For a number of years we have given vent to loud lament, lamentations over the treatment we have received in literature and art. Well, what ought we do about it? Beg white writers and artists to treat us with more consideration? Of course not. What we need to do is to rear a group of Negro American writers and artists who can smash the old stereotypes and replace them with newer and truer ones, who can produce work that will reach and affect many and many a white American who may never in a lifetime exchange 100 words with a Negro, who can produce a work that may affect people who will never even see a Negro. How are we going to rid this group of writers and artists? By leaving them to get encouragement and support as best they can, or by having them work primarily and definitely for us? A New York publisher once said to me, "I would publish any good book touching on the Negro that came to me. If I felt that I could count on 3,000 colored people buying it, I had to tell him that he could not count on 3,000. No, not on 2,000, not even on 1,000, not even on 1,000 out of 12 million. We are not book buyers. We are not book readers. We lack intelligence about books. We show small interest even in books that vitally affect us, either for good or for ill. We have many cultured homes with elegant apartments with grand pianos, grand victrolas, and grand radios, but not a bookshelf. If we had only 12,000 Negro American book buyers, and I mean by book buyers, persons who go regularly into a bookstore looking for a good book or who make up their minds about it from reading the literary reviews, the publishers of the United States would take notice, and as a consequence there would come into being a corps of Negro writers to set themselves to the task of changing and forming public opinion. But this demands the spending of money, some of our own. We have tried a number of factors in the working out of our problem, and each of them has produced results in accordance with its applicability and the effectiveness with which we have used it. Nevertheless, one of the most powerful factors that could be brought to bear we have scarcely used at all. The factor is money. If we were as far-sighted as we thought we ought to be, we would raise a fund of at least $500,000 to be expended for the specific purpose of advertising our good points and making them familiar to America and the world. With a fund of that size, we could begin and carry on for some time a systematic publicity campaign through books, periodicals, moving pictures, and other mediums in the United States, Europe, and Japan. A campaign that would gradually affect national and world opinion. Such a campaign would not need to be fictitious propaganda. The facts of our history in this country and our struggles and progress would furnish an expert public relations counsel for us with all the material he needed. No intelligent person has to be informed of the power of skillful publicity. We have seen the demonstration that a sufficient amount of it can, on one hand, foster a sense of admiration, respect, and friendliness between two nations, or, on the other hand, stir up enough hatred to start them at each other's throat. We have stood by while we almost universally received unfavorable publicity and trusted mainly to luck for what was favorable. We ought to make a planned effort to reverse this condition. When we have been called on to safeguard our civil rights, we have had to pass around the hat to get the money, and seldom have we succeeded in getting enough. We ought to have a trust fund of at least $500,000 for that purpose. From a fund like that, aid could be drawn for the Scottsboro defense. Other cases that will arise could be adequately taken care of, a part of which a fund could be used at this very time to follow up the decisions in the Texas white primary cases won by the NAACP in the Supreme Court. Supreme Court decisions do not enforce themselves. It is up to us to see that they are not disregarded. I have here talked of raising funds amounting to millions of dollars. That sum will That sum will to many be staggering. Many will say, "We are poor. We can't possibly raise $1 million. We won't in our present disorganized state, but we could do it, and we would do it if we were sufficiently alive to the need. We spend greater sums than that for less vital things. $1 million would average less than 10 cents apiece, and there are individual Negro Americans who could make up for the contribution of 1,000 or 5,000 of 10,000 who would not give. I am constrained once again to quote that sad truth uttered by Professor Kelly Miller: "We pay for what we want and beg for what we need." The conclusion. In these few pages I have made no attempt at a general consideration of social problems. Rather, I have sought to limit the discussion to the peculiar and immediate problems that confront us as a special group. I have also sought to project the discussion from the base of the conditions as they are, and not from the base of the conditions as we wish they were. I have tried to show that the most logical, the most feasible, and most worthwhile choice for us is to follow the course that leads to our becoming an integral part of the nation with the same rights and guarantees that are accorded to other citizens, and on the same terms. I have pointed out that common sense compels us to get whatever and all the good we can out of the system of imposed segregation, to gather all the experience and strength that can be got from it, but that we should use that experience and strength steadily as it rapidly as possible to destroy the system. The seeming advantages of imposed segregation are too costly to keep. I have enumerated our principal forces and resources and set forth that none of these factors is a panacea, that we must correlate all our elements of strength to form a superpower to be centered in our main objective, that knowing the rights we are entitled to, we must persistently use this power to defend those rights we hold, so that none may go by default, and to secure those we have not yet gained. I have stressed the vital need of plans and steps for uniting black and white workers. I have made plain the importance of interracial contact. I have pointed out the necessity of enlisting the energies of the youth. I have shown that in addition to other factors there is an emotional factor to deal with. I have implied the fact that our policy should include an intelligent opportunism, by which I mean the alertness and ability to seize the advantage from every turn of circumstance whenever it can be done without sacrifice of principle. We require a sense of strategy as well as a spirit of determination. To revolutionary elements, it will no doubt appear that what I have outlined is too conservative. If it does, it is not because I have unconscious of the need of fundamental social change, but because I am considering the realities of the situation. Conservatism and radicalism are relative terms. It is an radical for a black American in Mississippi to claim his full rights under the Constitution and the law as it is for a white American in any state to advocate the overthrow of the existing national government. The black American in many instances put his life in jeopardy, and anything more radical than that cannot reasonably be required. Much that I have here written I have stated before, and what I have said I have sought to avoid being either academic or lyric. I have spent no time with analysis of the psychology of race prejudice. I have suggested no quick or novel cure-all, for there is none. There is no salient to be captured. Our battle is along a wide front. What I have outlined is a plan for a long, hard campaign, a campaign that will demand courage, determination, patience, not, however, the patience to wait, but the patience to keep on working and fighting. This may seem far from a cheerful prospect, but why should we utter wails of despair? Our situation is luxuriously easy to what former generations have endured. We ought to gain fortitude from merely thinking of what they came from, and we ought to gather inspiration from the fact that we are in the right. We are contending for only what we are entitled to under the organic law of the land and by any high standard of civilization, of morality, or of decency. Black America is called upon to stand as the protagonist of tolerance, of fair play, of justice, and of goodwill. Until white America heeds, we shall never let its conscience sleep, for the responsibility for the outcome is not ours alone. White America cannot save itself if it prevents us from being saved. But in the nature of things, white America is not going to yield what rightfully belongs to us without a struggle kept up by us. In that struggle, our watchwords needs to be work, 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 and our rallying cry, fight, fight, fight. I offer now some words of caution. We are in the constant danger of growing to feel that all the ills we suffer are due to race prejudice, and so of falling into the habit of framing excuses for our own shortcomings. We must try to avoid that danger. We should squarely face our failings, and two, we should remember that if race prejudice were abolished today, there would remain to us tomorrow all the ills that are coming to humanity. That, however, is exactly the point we are striving to reach, the point where we can enter the race not handicapped back of the line, but starting from the scratch. In the situation to which we are thrown, let each one of us, let the whole race be ceaselessly on guard against the loss of spiritual integrity. So long as we maintain that integrity, we cannot be beaten down, not in 1,000 years. For instance, we suffer the humiliations of Jim Crowism, but we are not vitally injured so long as we are not Jim Crowed in soul. If it is necessary for me to travel on the railroad in a Jim Crow state, I am, in all probability, forced to climb into a Jim Crow car. But the injury inflicted on me is only external, unless I should feel within myself that I am in my right place, that I am where I belong. Each time one of us voluntarily and unnecessarily Jim Crows himself, he is undermining his spiritual integrity. We often permit merely timidity to undermine our spiritual integrity. We must throw off timidity and break through the barriers whenever we are able to do it. We often take discrimination for granted where there actually is none, or where it is so indefinite that a little courage and pressure would sweep it away. Each time we break through or sweep away discrimination, we make it easier for the next time and the next one. This is a struggle in which time after time we are compelled to yield ground. Let us never yield ground spiritually. The pledge to myself which I have endeavored to keep through the greater part of my life is, I will not allow one prejudiced person or 1,000,000 or 100,000,000 to blight my life. I will not let prejudice or any of its attendant humiliations and injustice bear me down to spiritual defeat. My inner life is mine, and I shall defend and maintain its integrity against all the powers of hell. The end.